This project started when I discovered a horseshoe in our garden. One day it wasn't there, and the next day it was. And I was like, that's weird. Was Pegasus flying overhead? I have no idea where it came from. All I can think was it had been buried below the surface and sort of managed to come up. I've been told it's a very old one because of the design of it, but it did get me to thinking, could I get some horseshoes? And could I decorate them? And the answer was yes. So if you have horses, or you're doing decorations for a wedding, or you'd like a decorated horseshoe to hang over your front door for good luck, I'll show you what I did. My name's Liz Chadderton. I'm a watercolour artist based in Berkshire. Every week I share tips and tricks I wish I'd known about ages ago. But sometimes I like to do something a bit more crafty. So I'm going to show you how I primed them, how I did a base layer, decoration, and then how I sealed them to protect them. I will also tell you shortcuts, because if you're just making these as one-offs for a party decoration and they're going to be thrown away, you want a shortcut. You've managed to get hold of some horseshoes. I don't know whether you've just wrangled them off a horse or a friendly person has given them to you. And there's a few different stages. So first of all, we've got to clean it, then we've got to prime it, then we've got to paint it, the base coat, and then decorate it. The fifth stage is sealing it to protect it. So I'll move those to one side, and unless you have a very nice person, when you get your horseshoes, they are likely to be really mucky. The friend who gave me these had done an initial wash, which was terribly kind of her, but all this groove, which I believe is called fullering, it increases the grip of the shoe, I am told. All that was full with sand and sort of fibre from the dressage place and, well, I guess horse poo. So it was quite a job to clean them. Something like a small flat screwdriver is quite good for gouging things out, especially the nail holes. Some of these nail holes were like they were filled with concrete. I think I've got about everything out. It can help to soak them in soapy water to loosen everything so that then you can gouge it out. But actually, because these had been on sand, it helped. It was a little bit easier when they were totally dry to sort of get the sandy stuff out. Might be a bit rusty, so a wire brush is handy for getting the last of the rust off. Do go careful, because by the time you've gouged yourself with this, it's really sore. This is the horseshoe that started it all, and you may be lucky and be given horseshoes without that ridge, the fullering, or it might just be in some places. If you can, if you have a choice, and I think it's unlikely you have a choice, beggars can't be choosers, do get one without that fullering, because then you've got a far nicer surface to decorate. But all the ones I've got have got that groove, so, well, tough. So you've got a choice at this point. If you're just decorating them for a very short-term use, you don't need to prime them. If they're going to hang around for a bit longer, what you want to do is stop the rust coming through the paint. So the proper stuff to use is this red oxide primer. You can get paint that goes direct onto rust. So this is Hammerite, direct to rust metal paint. You just spray it on, no need for primers. So you could just spray that on if you can get it in the right colour. There are other metal primers that maybe aren't quite as rust resistant. I'm going to use this because I've got it. I guess that's in the end, you know, what have you got? It is red, so if you're then going to paint them a light colour, just bear that in mind. I've got my brush in a plastic bag to stop it drying out in between coats. It's been in its bag for a couple of days and has dried out, so this is really stiff, but never mind. You're meant to do 2 coats. I personally wouldn't, because in the end, we are just painting a horseshoe. We are not painting the Mona Lisa, but that is your choice. Good idea to paint the underside first, and then we can lay it down because that little lip will stop it sticking to the paper. It does take a long time to dry. I would say an overnight at least. I would be really careful about getting too much in that groove because it stays tacky for ages. As a top tip, you've spent ages getting your nail holes all nicely cleaned out. Just make sure your paint doesn't clog them again, and a cocktail stick is really handy. This is what it'll look like when it's dry, and you've got a choice now of what you're going to paint it with. This copper one, I happen to have some spray paint which went on really nicely, and so I just sprayed the underside, tipped it over, sprayed the top. I've got some acrylic paint here, and this one I used a metallic acrylic paint and it took 3 coats. It was really thin. This one that I've already decorated, it was way better quality acrylic, and that took 2 coats to cover fully. I really fancy using this colour. It's one of my absolute favourite colours. So I'm going to do the underneath to start with, and then, oh, this looks quite hopeful actually. That is covering really well. Acrylics are waterproof once dry, so if you get it on you, you need to wash your hands quickly if you don't want them to be stained. I don't care, I'm always covered in paint. And if you get it on clothing, obviously wash it off straight away. When you're finished, you need to wash your brush out, otherwise the acrylic will just dry in there and ruin your brush. While you're waiting for your horseshoes to dry, it might be a good idea to think how you'd like to decorate. I'd really recommend using acrylic markers. They're going to be so much easier than using a fine paintbrush and acrylic paint. Of course, you can absolutely leave them plain. You could stick things on them, cover them in glitter. Entirely up to you. But some sort of pattern's fun. What pattern you achieve, of course, might depend on what mark you've got. So I've got a brush pen here. Always remember to shake them just to mix up the paint. And the great thing about these brush pens is good for doing dots. Depending how hard you press, you can get bigger dots, smaller dots, but they are also great for making on the side, for making sort of petal shapes. Other of acrylic markers actually need pumping up and down to get the ink to flow. These are double tipped markers. You see there's no ink on there, so I'll have to press up and down depending on the marker, just how many times you're going to have to press. So how many was that? That was about 15, 20. So that's finer, and you could write or do fine marks with that. Some just have a plain sort of bullet end, so you can only do a fine mark. And if you wanted to do this sort of petal, you're actually going to have to draw it and fill it in. These are also great for doing heart-shaped ones, so you just overlap 2 of the sides and you've got an immediate heart, which is nice if you were doing this for a wedding type thing. While your paint's drying, have a practice, find some patterns that appeal to you. So let's start decorating this one. This one had 2 coats of very matte black acrylic applied to it. I rather like just the random dots. I like the layered random dots, so I'm going to do the same on this but with different colours. I think it would be fun to use sort of peacock colours. So if you're not that confident and don't want to go straight in, obviously please form a plan. But the good thing about these dots is they're totally random, so it doesn't matter. Don't forget to do the sides. I wouldn't worry about doing underneath. What I think is nice to do on the back side, because that's never on display, is maybe to write a message or your name or the date it was decorated. Let's do some of these dots a little bit larger. If you accidentally smudge anything, say wipe it off quickly before it has a chance to dry, or disguise it. What you do about the groove is entirely up to you. You might paint the inside of the groove. Say on this one I've painted something on the inside of the groove. You might want to leave it clear. Okay, I'm going to start layering these up now. I quite fancy turning this into a little flower meadow of daisies. I like daisies. To be honest, I think I'm going to keep it really simple. I'll try and do something a bit more representational on this one, about some little ladybirds. So I've just been practicing, trying to think what a ladybird actually looks like. So they've got a little round nose, and then they've got the head. They have those sort of white markings. Like that. They've got little antennae. And you can just put that little shine. What I think is nice to do when you're finishing these off is to write a message on the back. So I've just said hand painted in Hurst because that's where I live. You could of course write a special message. All that remains to do is to seal these in some way. Again, totally not necessary if you're just using them as a one-off for a party. The acrylic is waterproof, but say you wanted them to be outside for a little longer, a bit of extra protection is necessary. You could get a spray varnish if you happen to have it, go for a high gloss if you want, or you can get a brush on, and I happen to have two that's okay for internal or external use, and I'm going to just use a satin varnish on these. Only if you want them to last a long time would I put any extra protection on. Acrylics are hard wearing and pretty resistant, so a little bit out time with no varnish on really isn't going to hurt anything. Don't forget to do the undersides and then just let them dry. So I hope you have enjoyed decorating your horseshoes, seeing the different stages to go through and what you can miss out safely and what you should probably not miss out. In terms of displaying, you could just put nails through a couple of the holes and hang them on there. Or you could always put some ribbon or string through a couple of the holes and suspend them like that. And the final thing to say is you've got to decide which way up you want to hang your horseshoe. Most people will hang it this way so that the good luck doesn't drip out. Except in the UK and Rutland, people hang it up the other way so the open end is down, because then whoever walks under it shares in your good luck. Where you live, which way up do you display horseshoes?